Join us on a journey through Gretsch heritage. With today's special guest, 𝗟𝗩𝗖𝗬𝗢𝗡. Episode 7, The Halcyon Years.
Greetings to the worldwide Gretsch community. I am lighting this candle for the first time since the last show, so I'm glad it works. I would like to welcome you. My name is Lucas van Gretsch, and I would like to welcome you to this 7th installment of, had my snares off, Gretsch Heritage. Great to have you guys here. I think I need to get some new drumsticks because these are like grade B hickories, not cutting it. So you guys shoot me a message in the chat, what kind of drumsticks you think I should buy. I heard the Anthony McKelly sticks are pretty good. So let me know. We'll try to keep this show as interactive as possible. So do write in the chat so you can, with questions or comments or ideas, and we'll try to get to your comments in the comment section. And yeah, so for those of you tuning in for the first time, I'm what you would call a modern day member of the Gretsch family. And it is my mother's brother, my uncle Fred Gretsch, who's the current owner of Gretsch. And it is my mother's father's father's father, my great-great-grandfather, Friedrich Gretsch, who started the company all the way back in 1883. And I like to bring his picture up just to keep his spirit alive in this show every once in a while, because he is certainly with us. We can thank him for so many wonderful instruments throughout the years, for sure. I'm really excited about today's show. We will be talking about the period in Gretsch in the early 1950s, an era at Gretsch where there's just a lot going on in the music business and with Gretsch. And that'll be in our first segment. And then in our second segment, we will be checking in with Gretsch artist 𝗟𝗩𝗖𝗬𝗢𝗡. Ash has been with Gretsch now for, I think, about 5 years, and he's become friends with our family. And as many of you know, he's just a really great ambassador for the Gretsch brand. And then in our third segment, we will, of course, be checking in with the Gretsch Drums Factory in Ridgeland, South Carolina, to see what kind of drums they're working on these days. And finally, in our fourth segment, we will do the quiz. So be sure to listen carefully to today's presentation of Gretsch in the early 1950s so you can win a prize right there, raise the roof. And I am delighted every time a winner gets that shirt and sends me a picture of them wearing that shirt. That is, nothing could make me more happy. Very nice. So in our last installment, for those of you that tuned in, we had the incredible Cindy Blackman Santana on the show. Boy, what a wonderful guest she was. And I forgot to plug her album on that show. This is her latest release, Give the Drummer Some. It's a really great album, and it is a lot of different genres. And in this album, you really see what an incredible, some super artwork here. Check that out. Can you see that? But in this album, you really see what an incredible world-class drummer she is. And she's also just a really nice person. She, I forgot to plug her album, but she didn't even bother me about that because she's such a nice person. In any case, it was great to have her on and to hear her tell stories about her early days in New York and her connections with Art Blakey and her special friendship with Art Blakey back in the day. And boy, it was so nice to connect with her. But I do encourage you, check out this album, and as always, buy the vinyl because it sounds great and you get to support the musicians, hopefully. And so I thought we could set the stage for today's show by taking a look at a classic video of a pregame show from the Brooklyn Dodgers era. And it's a show called The Knothole Gang. This was a show hosted by a gentleman by the name of Happy Felton in the 1950s at Ebbets Field in Brooklyn, New York. And this show was broadcast live prior to every home game for the Brooklyn Dodgers. And you'll see here on this particular day, Happy Felton is a very special guest indeed. Let's take a look.
Mr. Fred Gretsch is the president of the Gretsch Musical Instrument Company right here in Brooklyn, an old Brooklyn concern. I want you to meet him right now. Hiya, Fred.
Hiya, Happy.
Glad
Nice
to see you. The charming lady with you, please.
My wife, Happy.
Mrs. Gretsch, how are you? I hope you're going to see the Dodgers win tonight. This business that you're in, band instrument, there's a great growth of that among our boys and girls today, isn't there?
Oh, the band instrument music movement throughout the country has been tremendous, Happy.
I understand that actually you people are trying to do the same thing we're trying to do with baseball. If they're interested in music, playing in bands, they're not going to get in much trouble, are they?
No, we in the music business always say that the boy who blows a horn will never blow a safe.
Well, I think that's a very good slogan. Tell me, do we have any outstanding outfits around here that are especially noted?
Oh, we have some very fine bands in the metropolitan area. Some fine high school bands at Hempstead High School, at Erasmus Hall High School, at Midwood High School, and Port Washington High School, and many others. And a lot of the junior high schools in the city have very good bands, and even down into the grade schools. Take Public School 225 down in Brighton Beach. They have an excellent band.
And you make all the instruments, the Gretsch Manufacturing Company or Band Instrument Company, you make all the instruments for the bands?
Well, we make or import all the band and orchestra instruments, everything except harps and pianos.
Well, isn't that fine? Very interesting.
There you have it, folks. That was my great uncle, Fred Gretsch, Jr. What a fun interview. And the boy that blows a horn will never blow us safe. Man, you know, wiser words have never been said. That is just a great one-liner, and I love the vibe of that video. It's amazing to hear how thick his Brooklyn accent was. For those of you wondering what a Brooklyn accent sounds like, well, that was it. A few minutes later, on this show, on this episode, the amazing number 42, Jackie Robinson, comes onto the show. For those of you living outside of the U.S., you may not know, but Jackie Robinson was the first African-American to play professional baseball. Very cool indeed. So I wanted to show this video because I wanted to talk a little bit about the age-old Gretsch family tradition of supporting music education. As you saw in the Gretsch video, Gretsch was actively supporting musical education back in the 1950s, and it makes me think about how today, perhaps more than ever, there's a dire need to promote and support music education. There's a war going on, folks. It's not a war that you can hear about in the news because no one's really talking about it. I'm talking about the war with musical instruments on one side, and the smartphone and gaming on the other side. Your kids today are learning musical instruments because they're gaming or playing with their smartphones. Smartphones winning this war because the smartphone gives kids this instant gratification, this short-term dopamine-driven feedback loop, and it's leveraging that same neural circuitry that you see with the roulette machines or slot machines. So it's tough for musical instruments to compete against this for sure. And it takes, as many of you know, it takes muscle memory it takes it a while to learn a rudiment or to play an arpeggio on a piano or chords on a guitar. This takes a while, and you really got to stick to it before the big payoff comes. And that requires patience and discipline from the musician. And this also requires a society that has an infrastructure in place that will support music education. In continuing the Gretsch family's commitment to music education, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate my Aunt Dinah and Uncle Fred Gretsch, who have donated $3 million to Georgia Southern University and established the Fred and Dinah Gretsch School of Music. They've also donated the entire Gretsch family collection of instruments. Many of these instruments we've featured on previous installments of this show. And the plan is to have these instruments exhibited in museums in various locations. So hats off to Fred and Dinah Gretsch for this historic partnership with Georgia Southern University. And for more information on this, you can check out georgiasouthern.edu. So with that, what do you say we jump into our Gretsch time machine and roll the clock back all the way to the end of 1949, where we last left off. In December of 1949, Birdland opens its doors for the first time. Who's heard of Gretsch Night at Birdland? Here you see a picture of Pee Wee Marquette on the left, who was the MC at Birdland, together with the radio disc jockey Bob Garrity, who hosted the all-night Birdland show on WABC. Birdland would be partnering with Gretsch in many ways until its eventual closing in 1965. It's located just off of 52nd Street. This club is named after Charlie Parker's nickname Bird. Charlie Parker performs there frequently. Charlie Parker, together with Dizzy Gillespie, would be leading the way for the bebop movement in the early 50s. It was a musical movement that was operating on a tightrope and certainly had many critics. Louis Armstrong often publicly made fun of bebop, and Tommy Dorsey even called Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker musical communists. But despite the naysayers, bebop was a very sophisticated musical style. When you listen to Bertha the Cool, you really hear, this is featuring Gretsch artists Max Roach and Kenny Clark. You can hear the sustained intensity in the music, and the sound was intricate and sophisticated and demanding, and really only the most highly skilled musicians were capable of playing it. So, turning to the cover of the Merchant's Catalog of 1950, we see it boasting 16 Gretsch artists and a heavy emphasis on broadcaster drums, particularly the Gretsch Broadcaster Bebop Kit. Mind you, we are still in the early days of jazz kits here. So to give you a frame of reference, Tony Williams is only 4 years old in 1950. So we're in the early days. In any case, you'll see the sizes are a bit larger than today's standard jazz configuration of 12, 14, and 18. The sizes of the Broadcaster Bebop Kit here, where this was a 14 by 20, 9 by 13 tom, big 16 by 16 floor, and a 5.5 or a 6-inch. 5.5 or a 6.5 snare. 20-inch bass drum was considered an innovation because up until that point, most companies were only marketing 22 and 24-inch bass drums. So you can see there's already a demand for smaller drum sets as gigging musicians in metropolitan areas struggled to fit their kits in the backs of a taxi. These smaller sizes, like the 18-inch bass drum, would first come later on. So for now, if you needed a smaller kit, you could opt for the Gretsch One-Nighter, which was basically a broadcaster kit without toms, or the Gretsch One-Nighter Plus, which was a broadcaster kit without a floor tom, a little bit bigger. Speaking of small kits, Gretsch also marketed the cocktail drum in the early 50s. Who doesn't love a good cocktail drum, huh? 1950 version had no bass drum pedal, as you see here. This is a 14 by 24 with a 5.5 by 8 tom on the side. But by 1914, the pedal finally appears, and with an amazing 28-inch depth. I always struggled whenever I had to play a foot pedal standing up, I always struggled. Who here can do that? Please write a response in the chat if you're capable of playing drums while standing up and mastering that pedal. We'll have to ask Ash Sohn if he can do that. I always wondered how Slim Jim Phantom did it. Of course, the great Slim Jim Phantom, Stray Cats drummer. And this was a poster series from the early, from the early 80s. And this is one of many Gretsch drum posters hanging on the walls in the house I grew up. Slim Jim is a very cool cat indeed. I think he seems like a really nice person. We'll have to see if we can get him on this show soon. Let's take a closer look at the snare drums. Broadcaster snare was called the new narrow model with a 5 by 14 dimension. This time, 5 inches was considered narrow at the time, but Max Roach was already talking to Gretsch about building an even narrower snare with a 4-inch height. This 4-inch snare would become known as the Max Roach model and would later be known as the progressive snare. Here is a picture of Denzil Best playing one of the original Max Roach snares. See, when Gretsch came out with the Max Roach snare, when they came out with the Max Roach snare, they used the old Gladstone tube lugs. Looks a little bit different. Here's a picture of what the original Max Roach snare drums looked like. You can recognize those. For those who were tuned into the Gladstone show, those are the same tube lugs that were on the Gladstones. Pretty cool. Within a few years, though, the Max Roach snare switched over to the lugs with the streamlined casings, like you see here. And this is a picture of Ash Sohn's Max Roach snare in Midnight Blue, a drum we lovingly call Fat Max for its fat, beefy sound despite its slim dimensions. This version of the Max Roach drum with these lugs would first appear in the 1954 Gretsch catalog. Speaking of lugs, we really see the switch from the boxy rectangular-shaped rocket lugs seen here to the more elegant streamline casings seen here, which has become the Gretsch standard lug up until today. Here you see all the variations of this new lug. From left to right, the 5472 was used on normal size snares. 5471 for the progressive 4-inch snares like we saw in Ash Zone. The 5473, which is used on mounted toms, and its big brother, the 5474, which is used for floor toms and bass drums. And these were all introduced in the early 1950s, and the lugs are called streamlined lugs, as you can see here, because the shape design has a real 50s retro feel to it, which is certainly one way to just regard that classic Gretsch style. To call the style retro maybe doesn't pinpoint it enough. I would rather call it retro futuristic, as in this is what people in the 50s thought the future would look like. Kind of like a 1953 Studebaker seen here. It's not solely retro, but its elegant curves and refined smoothness give a glimpse into what the future can bring. And I like to think that that is what Gretsch drums and guitars can achieve on a stylistic level. Helping Gretsch achieve this, of course, was the fact that all hardware on Gretsch drums was chrome-plated in-house, giving Gretsch drums an extra shiny appearance when compared to competitors' nickel-plated hardware at the time. Throughout Gretsch history, you see many examples of Gretsch retrofuturism, which began here in the early 1950s. Take, for example, the Gretsch Astrojet from 1964, seen here. On the drum side, the incredible New Classic series, which we marketed from 2004 to 2012. If I had a nickel for every time someone told me how much they loved their New Classic kit, why don't you guys let us know, those of you who have a New Classic kit, write it in the chat. I know might be a couple of you guys out there watching this. In any case, here you see this retro futuristic elegance in these New Classic lugs. Very classy look indeed. Around this time in the early 1950s, we also see the introduction of the rail consolette with the diamond-shaped plate seen here. This is my favorite tom holder. And the toms have a diamond plate bracket with a clip mount, which the tom mount can slide into. We also see the first 4820 diamond plate floor tom leg holders appearing around this time. So the reason I'm showing these is because all of these features have been used throughout the years and can still be ordered with your Gretsch drums today. So when you're ordering these options, I like to think you're connecting with a product design from over 70 years ago and thereby connecting with the Gretsch heritage in a very profound way. Here's a cool looking kit from 1952. Check this out. You have the standard 5.5 by 14 snare and a 9 by 13 tom. And then things really get wild and woolly with the floor tom, which is 24 by 16. That is 2 feet deep, folks. And a 20 by 20 bass drum. Love that bass drum size. This kit, of course, heavily influenced by Louis Bellson's kit, which had a 26 by 18 middle tom and 2 20 by 20 bass drums. My Uncle Fred claims that when he began working at Gretsch as a young boy in 1955, there were only a few folks building drums, and most of the orders were custom jobs like the kit I just showed you. It wasn't really until the late 1950s and 60s when demand for Gretsch drums would really take off. So now that we've taken a look at the Gretsch drums of the early 1950s, let's check out some of the drummers that were playing them. It's here in the early 50s where we really begin to see the work of Gretsch brand manager Phil Grant come to form. And Phil Grant, seen here standing just behind the white snare drum, was the brand manager and artist relations manager for Gretsch throughout the 1950s and 60s. Position today, which is taken by Andrew Shreve, as many of you may know. And Phil Grant, back in the day, he was just much like Andrew Shreve. Phil Grant was very engaged in pushing and promoting the brand in every possible way. And Phil Grant teamed up with a photographer, Chuck Stewart, and did a photo shoot with the drummers at the kit. And the drums all over the place, including this now famous photo of Max Roach, which I really love. So many interesting drummers playing Gretsch around this time. My goodness, it's almost overwhelming to think about it. And now in our last show, in our last installment, we looked at some huge names, drummers that are still household names like Art Blakey and Joe Jones and Max Roach, at least in my household. I like to think these drummers are household names, and they are certainly household names in many of the people watching. These are household names in your homes, but today we're going to go a little bit deeper. Drummers that were huge in the early 1950s, but are perhaps less remembered by the general public today. So let's see who we got here. Sonny Payne, the incredible Sonny Payne, who was in the early 50s. He was playing with Erskine Hawkins' big band, and a few years later would become Count Basie's drummer. Sonny was known to be a real showman and a flashy personality. And you can see some incredible videos of him flipping the sticks, but just playing super, super tight. And according to Elvin Jones, Sonny Payne was a showman who knew what he was doing, like a tightrope walker on a high wire act. He just made the Count Basie band come alive. I thought it was beautiful. And then here we've got a very young Mel Lewis, who would go on to receive no less than 14 Grammy nominations throughout his career. When Lewis joined Stan Kenton's band in 1954, many jazz critics credited him with being the first drummer to make the Kenton band swing. Mel Lewis later became known as a drummer who would speak his mind, a real old school kind of guy. He firmly believed that it was impossible for a drummer to swing with a match grip. He was also utterly opposed to electronic drums. He once stated that the company responsible for the Lynn drum machine should be blown up. When young drummers asked Mel Lewis if he gave lessons, he always said, "I teach every Monday night at the Village Vanguard," which was his steady gig in the 1980s with his Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra. Oh, if we could only go back in time and get those lessons from the Village Vanguard. Here's a neat picture of Gretsch artist Denzil Best. Throughout the 40s, Denzil Best played with some key figures in bebop, guys like Coleman Hawkins, Ben Webster, and 𝗟𝗏𝗘𝗏𝗏𝗏. 1953, he was in a terrible car accident and broke both his legs. Can you imagine? But he returned in 1954 to play with Artie Shaw. Denzil Best is perhaps most remembered for his amazing playing with brushes, particularly on his recording with George Shearing from 1948 to 1952. So do check out those recordings if you can. One of the more visible drummers of the day was the television and radio star Don Lamond, or Big Don as they called him. He worked for NBC and ABC, most notably as the drummer on the Steve Allen Show. Don Lamond is the greatest big band drummer that ever lived. And those aren't my words. Those are Buddy Rich's words. How about that? Particularly noteworthy is his work with the Woody Herman Orchestra. So if you get a hold of some of those recordings, please do check it out. Another Gretsch drummer that played with Woody Herman is the great Shelly Manne, who also played with guys like Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, and Stan Kenton in the 1940s. Shelly was a star pupil of Billy Gladstone. He had a mother who was very ill for most of her life, so he had to work really hard to support her. It's said by 1960, not even halfway through his career, Shelly Manne had recorded on well over 1,000 LPs. In the late 40s and early 50s, Shelly Manne was competing primarily against Max Roach and Buddy Rich, so he quickly developed his own unique style and was a meticulous timekeeper as well. Elvin Jones, it's fun to hear what Elvin Jones thinks about these guys. He's just such an incredible drummer himself, so to hear his opinion is always very enlightening, shall we say. Elvin Jones said of Shelly Manne, he could push a big band with the same qualities that apply to smaller groups. I just loved the way he played. He was an all-around guy and a wonderful musician. Shelly Manne moved to California in the early 1950s and really became associated with the West Coast jazz movement that was started by baritone sax player Jerry Mulligan, who played on Miles Davis's album Birth of the Cool. In the early 1950s, Jerry Mulligan puts together a quartet with Bob Woodlock on bass, Chet Baker on trumpet, and this gentleman right here, one of my all-time favorites, Gretsch Grandmaster Chico Hamilton, seen here with concert toms, way before concert toms were even a thing. They play a Monday night gig at a small nightclub called The Hague on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles. This is said to have been the beginning of the West Coast jazz movement, also called cool jazz. It was much less intense than bebop and more lyrical and compositional. Chico Hamilton would go on to become a highly innovative band leader, bringing in all types of different instruments into his compositions, like oboes and clarinets and bassoons and so forth. This brought in another dimension of jazz music. Chico is one of the prime movers in that regard. Louis Bellson once said about Chico, he proved that you can take a drum set and play with strings, play with woodwinds, or with a string quartet. Many of Chico's master recordings were tragically lost in the Universal Studios fire of 2008, but today we certainly can still celebrate the important role that Chico Hamilton plays in the Gretsch heritage. And although this is a drum show, it's important to remember that the Gretsch business is comprised of both drums and guitars, said the man with the Gretsch guitar shirt. In the early 1950s, we are still a few years before Chet Atkins would hit the scene, but Gretsch still releases its first electric guitar, the Electromatic Spanish model, seen here. It was around this time when Gretsch would really start taking the guitar business seriously, all with the help of the great Jimmy Webster, who served as a traveling ambassador for Gretsch guitars in this early period. Jimmy was also Gretsch's main ideas man, bombarding Gretsch management with design ideas in an effort to distinguish Gretsch from its growing competitors, Gibson and Fender. Of course, in 1950, Leo Fender comes out with the first solid body electric guitar called the Broadcaster. Sound familiar? It was called the Broadcaster, spelled with a C. The word soon hit the Gretsch offices in New York, and Fender had copied the Gretsch Broadcaster name, which Gretsch had a trademark on. As you can see from this Western Union telegram, Gretsch swiftly notified Fender of this, and Fender immediately discontinued the name Broadcaster and changed the name to Nocaster for the remaining models in the factory. These Nocasters have become quite the collector's item. This guitar then evolved to become known as the Telecaster, the first production solid body guitar in the world. Fender today is, of course, the worldwide distributor of Gretsch guitars, and last year the Gretsch family partnered with Fender to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the Broadcaster scandal. They re-released the Fender Broadcaster guitar with a C in the name, together with a matching Gretsch Broadcaster drum set with a K in the name. So check those out. So turning to the Gretsch family in the early 1950s, it's in the spring of 1952. There you see the couple that we saw earlier in the Brooklyn Dodgers video. It's in the spring of 1952 when company president Fred Gretsch Jr. meets and marries the love of his life, Helen Mooney. You can see these two at their engagement party at the famous Stork Club in Manhattan. Shoot us a chat if you have ever been to the Stork Club. They seem to be enjoying a night on the town and enjoying a nice after-dinner coffee and cigarette. Let's take a look at the Gretsch family tree here. You see at the top where it all began, the great Friedrich Gretsch and Rosa Gretsch, down to the second generation and the third generation. And we're really, right, I guess this era is really the third and fourth generation primarily. And you see Fred and Helen on the bottom right. And on March 16th, 1953, they have a daughter, my mother's cousin, Helen Gretsch, who is known in our family today as Happy, and she lives in Maine. And we send our regards to Happy. Hello, Happy. The fact that they would have no son, so that Fred Gretsch Jr. and Helen Gretsch, the fact that they only had one daughter, this fact would play a major role in the direction of the company in the 1960s, as we will be talking about in future installments. It's in this period in the early 1950s that the Gretsch family bids a final farewell to one of its great leaders, Fred Gretsch Sr., who is in the second from the top row and in the middle. And he passes away in 1952. For those of you that have been with us from the very beginning installments of Gretsch Heritage, you know what a significant role Fred Gretsch Sr. played in turning Gretsch from a small shop in Brooklyn into one of the largest musical instrument distributors on the planet. You see in this family tree that Fred Gretsch Sr. was the oldest son of founders Friedrich and Rosa Gretsch. When Fred Gretsch Sr. was 15 years old, his father died of cholera on a business trip. From this point, Fred Gretsch Sr., together with his mother, Rosa Gretsch, expanded the business at a daunting pace, including the construction of the massive 7-story structure at 60 Broadway in Brooklyn, which would be the main headquarters for Gretsch through the 1960s. Fred Sr. was also an innovator and always thinking of how to improve and streamline his business. Around 1918, he developed the revolutionary multiply drum lamination process. It was a vast improvement over the method of steam bending solid pieces of wood into cylinders. Can you imagine steam bending? Wow. With this new process, drum building became faster and cheaper, and the shells were consistently round, this multiply process. And his method was soon adopted by other drum manufacturers, and over 100 years later, the multiply drum shell remains the standard of the industry today, of course. On the Gretsch American banjo side, Fred Gretsch Sr. developed a die-cast rim, which was the first of its kind and a precursor to the use of die-cast extensively in Gretsch drums from the 1930s and until today. During the 1920s, Fred Sr. discovered he had a second business passion, and that was banking. He was able to juggle 2 careers successfully between the Gretsch Company and the Lincoln Savings Bank in Brooklyn. He was elected to the bank's finance committee in 1925 and became a vice president in 1930 and the bank's president in 1940. After his son, my grandfather, Bill Gretsch, passed away from cancer in 1948, Fred Sr. became actively involved in the lives of his grandchildren. He's remembered for always having candy in his pockets and taking his grandchildren to many pony rides. Here's a really neat picture of 3 Gretsch presidents, all named Fred Gretsch. In the middle is current Gretsch president, my Uncle Fred Gretsch, who many of you know. Fred Gretsch Jr. on the right, who was president from 1948 to 1967. And on the left, Fred Gretsch Sr., who was president from 1895 to 1942. My Uncle Fred, seen here in the middle, recently shared with me his own personal memories of Grandpa Gretsch taking him to the factory at 60 Broadway in Brooklyn. My uncle vividly recalls being driven with his grandpa down Metropolitan Avenue from his home in Kew Gardens in Queens. He recalls to this day the people, sounds, and smells of 60 Broadway, where my uncle really locked into the spirit of the music business, which still runs strong in my uncle to this very day, nearly 70 years later. Soon after these trips to 60 Broadway with his grandson, Fred Gretsch Sr. passed away on September 27, 1952, at the age of 72. And we shall close today's segment with one final picture of Fred Gretsch Sr. The year is 1880, and he is a 10-year-old boy with a very neat-looking bicycle and a flower in his lapel. This was taken in front of the Gretsch family home at the time at 20 Hart Street in Brooklyn, New York. And for those of you that live in the area, if you visit this address, you will find that exact same fence there. And the ornamental concrete carvings on the building are exactly the same. So for those of you enjoying the sound of your multiply drum shells and the look and feel of your die-cast hoops, you can thank this kid right here, my great-grandfather, Fred Gretsch Sr., a life well lived from 1880 to 1952. With that, we shall move on to our featured artist segment. You know, we talk a lot about innovation in this show, both from a product standpoint with Gretsch and also from a product standpoint, and also with Gretsch being the first to introduce the multiply drum shell and the die-cast hoops and so forth, but also from a player standpoint. Guys like Kenny Clark and Max Roach, who innovated and created a new bebop sound, and then guys like Elvin Jones and Tony Williams, who built off of these innovations and took on new directions of their own. Gretsch drums have always been in the center of innovation, and I am happy to say this next guest is someone who most certainly continues to that very same tradition of innovation. Here's a clip of Ash from the 2020 NAMM show from my web series, A Gretsch Abroad. In a few of your recent videos, I noticed you playing a Max Roach snare drum.
Yeah. I've been experimenting with shallower drums to make a fatter sound. I found this beautiful 14x4 1950s Max Roach signature drum, basically, and it's absolutely creating quite a buzz that people are really digging the sound.
What do you think Max Roach is thinking about up in heaven
Well,
when he sees you getting that sound out of that snare drum?
That's obviously, it wasn't made to make that sound.
No.
You know, but it just so happens it does make a really great fat noise.
Yeah.
I hope that he would probably be like, okay, that's what these modern
That's
kids
the
are
new
doing.
thing, yeah. So without further ado, please welcome to Gretsch Heritage, Gretsch Groove innovator, HALCYON.
Hey, Lucas.
Hey, my friend, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you got it, man. Thanks for coming on.
And it's so brilliant to sort of to sit and watch all the history go by like that. It's mega.
Ah, glad you enjoyed it. I worked hard.
And so, you know, your knowledge, I guess you've got a lot in there regarding, you know, like the lugs. I didn't realize that when they first introduced, for instance, the Max Roach snare, it was a different lug. I mean, I never knew that.
Yeah, that's right. They were using.
Is that something you found out recently, or you've just inherited knowledge as well?
I was born with all this knowledge in my mind. No, it's something something I did pick up recently, if I'm going to be completely honest. When I was doing the research for today's presentation, I was like, oh, that's interesting that they were using the Glidestone lugs, and it's interesting to see how a lot of the production decisions were based off of, you know, just practical things. Like those were probably the only lugs that were maybe in the shop at the time in a relatively large volume, you know, so they maybe, oh, let's use up these Glidestone lugs. You know, amazing.
But you know, you are responsible for. I'll grab it. You're responsible for giving it its nickname. This guy, you know, Fat Max.
I think was that okay. I heard you say that before, and I always wonder if that's really true. Is that true?
Oh no, I think it was you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you said, "Hey, this Fat Max sounds good," and I think it just sort of stuck. I think some people, you know, some guys on Instagram, etc., picked up on the name, and then before you know it, that's what it is.
Right. And of course, spelled with PH because it's like the hip way to spell it.
Yeah. It's 2021, so it's a PH. But it's a great drum, and as you know, as you just heard, I mean, I've been messing around with shallower drums for a while to try and get, you know, if you get a deep snare drum and you detune it, sure, it's got a deep note, but when you mic it up, there's some frequencies that are missing because it's so deep. And I discovered to retain some sort of high end attack, if you use a shallower drum, then you get the fatness, but you also get that lovely sort of blatty sound. And it's this. I've tried a few different snares. I've tried a Babinga thing and some maple drums, all the same kind of depth. And this Fat Max is definitely the best sounding version of that shallower sound, you know.
Incredible. Amazing. That's so interesting, and it's a nice way to tie you in with the Gretsch heritage, you know, with this snare drum, which was first cataloged in 1954, and with of course Max Roach.
Yeah.
And you know, and it's you know, I know we once joked about what would Max Roach actually,
what would he say? I mean, I guess
what would he say about your videos and the sound you're getting? I
guess he'd be horrified to start with.
Do you think he'd be horrified? What would he think? What would he think? You know,
I mean, I guess it's sort of, if you think about like that clip you just played, it's pretty Luddite, the sort of playing, you know, it's very, I'd imagine a drummer like that back then, if they saw someone playing like that, would, the simplicity of it would probably, you know, it's so simple in some respects, playing 2 and 4 like that.
Yeah.
that they would probably question sort of how long's this guy been playing? You know,
that was a very specific clip that
sure.
Shall we say, a simpler groove from Ash Sohn, and everyone watching knows that your grooves often are much more
sure.
complex.
If you think about, you know, brushes, Max was known so well for his brushes, and I guess this snare drum he would have had it tuned much higher, and it would have been responsive in a much more sensitive way than what he's just seen there. And if you think about that sound that we just heard, I mean, nothing was making that noise in the 50s. Drums, in a way, weren't there. There's no way they were making that noise. No. So I think that's probably the most startling thing for someone like that to hear. That would be the sound. Like, how does it sound like that? I mean, you'd hope that they'd probably dig it. It'd be useful somewhere in their arsenal. But I guess that is the sound difference. I think is probably the thing that would be most shocking for them.
Shocking,
you know? Yeah. You know, if you think about it now, about those older guys, it was much more of a delicate process the way they played, I think. You know?
Well, you know, some of them were slamming.
Sure.
I mean, obviously Tony Williams, who's later in the early 1950s, but he was a slamming drummer, right?
Absolutely. And, well, I mean, like, really, the sort of first sort of jazz rock drummer, really, in a way, wasn't he?
Yeah, it's the fusion guy, right? So
all of a sudden, the volume went up, and people were like, "Okay, this is changing everything." Yeah. Incredible. Yeah. So I've got that 50s. And I also have another round brass, which is my main snare that I use.
Okay.
Which is 50s too, and I think this is.
Oh wow!
I think this is finishes Bermuda Sand. I think it's called.
Wow, very
nice. And it's got those same. Is it the streamline lugs, right?
Yeah, that's it. Those are the ones we were talking about. Yeah.
And this sounds amazing. This snare. Again, I've actually gone the other way with this one. I've cranked it so high, both sides.
Yeah.
It's almost like a sort of timbali tuning, but it sounds really great when I dampen it and tune it that high. It's like got a proper sort of hip hoppy kind of crack to it. It's mega. But also, if I detune it, it opens up a little bit more, and it's got that much more sort of standard ringy Gretsch sound. You know,
very nice.
Yeah. So you know, both of my snares that I've got on my kit are 50s. You know.
Very nice.
And often 50s hi-hats as well. I've got my 𝗟𝗔𝗥𝗦𝗢𝗔𝗔 which are 50s too.
Nice. Well, those were sold by Gretsch. So Gretsch was the distributor for them.
That's it.
Yeah.
Incredible.
So it all went through 60 Broadway in Brooklyn.
That's amazing.
So I want to remind people watching that they should, if they have a question for Ash, we'll try to get to it.
Yeah.
I'll just, you know, I have some things I'd like to ask you, but we'd like to also to have people join in if possible.
Yeah.
And one thing I thought I'd ask you is, you know, today we were talking about Gretsch in the early 50s, and is there a Gretsch drummer? We've talked a bit about Max Roach already, but is there another Gretsch drummer from this era that has inspired you?
Yeah, I guess Art Blakey. I was very, very fortunate.
Nice.
Yeah. What a dude. I was very, very fortunate. In 1984, my dad, you know, like a lot of dads, you know, there's probably some dads watching now that have got drum kits. Their kids have got drum kits, and if the kid needs to play somewhere, then, you know, I wasn't driving at 14, so my dad had to drive me around, and he was very much committed to my passion for drums. And he wasn't a musician himself, but he, you know, recognized that that's the thing that I was really getting into as a teenager. And he took me to see Buddy Rich in 1984. And very, very shortly afterwards, he took me to see Art Blakey in Nottingham. I checked the date. It was in July 1984 in Nottingham. And he played Ronnie Scott's that year. And I think he did some dates in Europe, but I think there was only 2 British dates, and one was Ronnie's, and then one was in Nottingham, which is like the middle of England. And yeah, my dad took me to that, and I somehow we managed to I guess with some other fans, managed to get backstage to meet the band, and I met Art Blakey, and there's a photograph. My sister's still trying to find it. There's a photograph of me sat on his knee backstage, you know, and it was, I think Wynton Marsalis was in the band, a young Wynton Marsalis.
Oh, wow, incredible.
Yeah. And the whole band, I can remember the picture, the whole band were behind him, and I was just in the center, I sat on Art Blakey's knee.
Wow.
You know, slightly, you know, being slightly teenage about it. But it was, you know, now I think back, I mean, it's like I'm just so fortunate to meet both of those drummers, you know. Buddy was not as friendly, but
What
very
happened?
well. I watched the show. That was in Wolverhampton, and that was '84 too. And when he came out to go to the tour bus after the show, my dad and I went round to the back gate, and there's autograph hunters and all sorts of people, and he sort of emerged through this crowd, and it was like, oh my God, my dad had a camera, and I said to him, can I have my photo? Can I have my photo with you? And I just remember him looking down at me, and he might have said camera or Kanye. I can't remember. I couldn't really figure out what he said. He's probably the first American I'd ever met, actually.
Right.
I didn't really get his accent.
Right.
And my dad was about 10 feet away from me. By the time I'd looked back at my dad for sort of reassurance, what's he said? I don't understand.
Yeah.
Have you got, you know, do you have the camera? By the time I turned back, he was walking off back to the tour bus. So that was it. I never had a photograph with him, but we did manage to snap him when he came out. I've got that photo somewhere. And he did sign my my program for the gig. I've got that too.
Wow, cool.
Yeah,
amazing, Buddy Rich.
And you know, amazing to meet him. The most memorable thing for me on that his particular show was he did this thing where he did a single stroke roll, and they backlit it. And I just remember looking from the audience, and you just see the sticks just fanning out, like.
Yeah.
Like it's still in my mind, that image, and the sound in that room as well was just incredible. You know,
wow.
Absolutely jaw dropping. A showman as well as obviously, you know.
Did you think at that time I want to do this at that age already? Were you already walking in?
I was 10 years old is when my dad actually played Sandy and Nelson Let There Be Drums to me. And that was it. I'm doing this, and I'm very fortunate. You know, I'm now talking to some friends and people that I've gone along in my life. I seem very lucky that I was so committed to what I wanted to do. Some people take all their lives to find out what they actually want to do. I mean, instantly I was like, that's what I'm doing. That I'm going to do that.
Oh, that sounds so refreshing
and incredibly it paid off, you know. And you know, thanks to my dad and my mum and dad, you know, supporting. Now I'm a father myself. You know, buying a 10-year-old a drum kit to put in their bedroom. That's quite a thing.
Yeah.
You know? My kids have got this place if they want to come. They're not reluctant, but they you know, music hasn't grabbed them yet, and that's fine. You know, maybe it's somewhere else, but for me, it was instantaneous. You know, I want to do that thing.
I think it must be important with kids to show that you're interested in music, or that you're doing music yourself, and your commitment to music, and eventually they're going to think, what is this all about, what he's doing, and they'll probably look into it more. You know,
absolutely. I think eventually the penny will drop.
Yeah.
You know, they saw me. I did the Voice TV show for like 7 years, and I was on TV every Saturday night for nearly like half the year. You know, and it was kind of like whatever. You know,
right?
And they never watched it. You know, and their friends would. I want to do the school run. Their kids would say, "Oh, I saw you on TV on Saturday."
I saw you on TV. Yeah.
You know, and it's just like it just became a sort of like whatever. Like I may as well have been a milkman. you know, or something. No offense to milkman, but you know, it's like
Right.
it became very normal.
Right.
And it is very normal, you know. I was FaceTiming, you know, Julian Lennon the other day about an album that we've been working on, and my daughter came in, and it's just like, whatever. But I guess at some point in their lives, they're going to go, wow, that was mad.
Yeah,
you know,
they realize, right.
Dad did that stuff, you know, I hope anyway.
Yeah. What was it like for you? But just obviously you don't go out in society these days, but like say just before the pandemic, and you in England, like, do people recognize you on the street? You know, because obviously in the drumming community, most people know who you are, but how is it in the general public? Like if you're
not really general public, but you know, there's quite a lot of drummers out there. I would get spotted by drummers. I mean, you know, very often when I was in London walking around, there'd be someone going, I'll be having a coffee somewhere in Kensington or something, and someone would come out and go, "Are you Ash Sown?" It's like that happened quite often. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. That's interesting. And you know they're drummers, right? I mean,
they're definitely into it, you know, and it's amazing. And of course, I guess they're going to, you know, I recognized all of my heroes back then, and like, you know, this is obviously pre-internet, but you know, back in the 80s and stuff, I would see the great British drummers at shows. You know, you go and see 𝗟𝗩𝗘𝗧𝗏, and of course, there's a whole lineup of London's finest drummers there, and that's the only way you would see them and be able to catch up with them. And you'd recognize them straight away. There's you know, Ian Thomas or you know, Ralph Salmons or someone. It's amazing.
Cool.
And now I guess, you know, our mugs are all over the internet every day. You know, these people are going to recognize us, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about your influence. You know, in this show, we talk about, you know, Art Blakey and Max Roach, and about how they, you know, to be influenced by these people, you'd have to see them at a concert, like you saw Art Blakey.
That's it.
Whereas today, it's like your power of influence, Ash, is much stronger, you know.
It's a scary, funny thing, really. You know, if you think like the amount of influence that you've got, it's mad. You know, I think probably more influential than some of the bands back in the day. It's really strange, you know.
How does that make you feel? Does that overwhelm you when you think like, wow, like you know, a lot of people are going to see this video? Or do you ever feel overwhelmed by? I know I would. I'd be like, oh Jesus, it's too much.
Yeah, I mean,
can't take the heat.
I very much got over the fact, you know, I think a lot of people are worried about posting stuff of them playing because they're going to be judged. That I'm over that. I don't care. You know, it's and I was very much when I started doing it. I you know, I'm trying, and I think if you try and you're experimenting, I think that's fine. And if some people don't dig it, then that's okay. Life's all right. I have self-confidence in that, in a way. But of course, it's also you are very, very influential, I guess, in some respects, but also it's it's over very, very quickly. So somebody might watch one of my things, they might listen to me on a Instagram live or whatever, or might be watching this, but very, very in a few minutes they're going to be doing something else, you know. That so that's also there too, you know, that there's so many different guys doing things. I guess the hardest thing is to sort of trying to be original and try and be true to yourself. That's the hardest thing, I think, nowadays, because there's so much influence from everywhere, playing and sounds and look and kits and cymbal setups and everything. It's like I'd imagine being a young drummer now, it's pretty confusing. Like where am I supposed to go, you know? It's interesting. And so I think the hardest thing probably for younger drummers now would be to try and stick to their path, you know.
It's important that you say that, because a lot of people do look up to you and respect you. And it's such an important point, is that people like you and your power of influence, that you say those things, you know. And it's much as possible. But also, is it your responsibility? That's another question. With your sort of profile, you also by default have a certain amount of responsibility. Do you feel that?
I do feel that. And I feel that I should try and get across to people that thing about being true to yourself and try not to be overwhelmed by the internet and all the drummers that are out there. There's so much. I mean, we're all, I feel the same. I watch stuff on Instagram and YouTube and stuff, and I'm blown away every single day by drummers.
Yeah.
But
wow,
it's like a constant sort of supply of wow factor every day.
The fire hose of wow factor. Yeah, I know what you mean.
And I think it's my responsibility to sort of reassure people that that is just that. It's just the internet. It's just social media. That's what you're going to get. So I feel to sort of get across the sort of root of what it is to be employed as a musician. I think I try and do that with younger drummers. I try and say, look, all of this stuff is kind of important, but the most important thing is trying to find your own voice and trying to then fit in to a place where you can actually keep going and have some sort of longevity in this business. So I feel when I'm talking to younger guys, I feel it's my responsibility to not stop them from chopping out, but certainly going, these are the things that I've worked on and I've concentrated on, and it's sort of paid off for me in the end. So just over this way, have a look over here for a bit. And
you mentioned it's paid off. Can we talk about your job a little bit? You're very visible with videos. Does that how do you make money? How do you make a living as Ash Sohn?
Well, I mean, I make a living just how I've always done, which in the early days it was touring, and that's obviously now there's a bit of a question mark with that, but I mainly earned money going on the road with bands. I back in the early 90s, I toured with 𝗟𝗏𝗖𝗬𝗢𝗏. I still play with that band. We've got a new record coming out. And I would just tour and get paid for tours and do a few different tours with people. Sessions back in the early 90s were just started to happen for me. And then for some reason, like everything, if you're lucky, I really enjoy the studio, and I love, it's my favorite thing, my favorite creative place. I love playing live too, but if I was given the option, studio was the one for me. And I still earn money doing what I've always done, which is to do sessions, and now there's since 1997 there's a royalty that's paid worldwide for performance, so you don't have to write the track. So if you play on a big song essentially and it's played on the radio, you will get a little money from that.
Okay, so Adele,
for instance, was played a lot and is still played a lot. So number one records are always good to play on, because I get a performance royalty, and that helps with the day-to-day with my sessions and things. And I've just been very, very lucky. And we've talked before about the is it possible to earn money from social media? And I think that indirectly, I think I get sessions. I get people asking me to do sessions from Instagram and YouTube and stuff from all over the world. There's Beyonce, and there's Adele, and there's Sam Smith, and but also there's another plethora of artists that we don't know about in other countries that are really famous and really fantastic artists that we're not aware of. And I get a lot. I've just played on a Russian album for I guess she's as big as Adele in Russia. And
what's her name?
𝗟𝗏𝗘𝗧𝗦𝗢𝗏.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you played on every track on the album?
No, I did a few, but in the end, it was just I only made it on one tune.
Okay.
But that's a huge record. You know,
Yeah.
it's going to be a huge record in Russia, and it's those are the sort of things that that's my bread and butter, playing for people, often playing for people that no one's ever heard of. You know.
Yeah. Cool.
No, I've done a lot of Spanish albums. I think I'm still in the top 10 in the Spanish chart. I have been for like over a year. It's great, with an artist called Manuel Carrasco. Like, cool. Incredible amount of records he sold in Spanish singing, Spanish speaking countries. Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's this stuff just comes, because we're present. I'm present.
So who's managing you? Like, do you have a manager? Like, when these requests come, how do they contact you?
I manage. Well, they find me. Artists will find me, and then I'll get a record company will drop me an email. Often the artist will see me, and then they'll ask their record company to contact me, and that's usually what happens. And sometimes I'll get a direct message in Instagram, which then is followed up with an official email.
Right.
And that's how the process goes quite often, Don't
you need a manager? No?
Well, years and years ago, I was very fortunate when I moved to London. I met the bass player Pino Palladino, and one of the things I asked him, does he have a manager? And he said no. He always manages himself. And I thought, well, if Pino does, well, I'm going to do it. So he would always cut a deal with the manager, with the record company, and I always do that. Wow. And now often talking directly with the artist about money, which some people would go, no, you can't do that. But that's the way it is now. Everyone's working from home and they're doing their own records, and it's like, you often will talk to the artist.
Wow.
About the dreaded wonga. Yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting. And I see you're in your studio, and
my little my sanctuary.
It's an old wooden post mill, correct?
That's right. There's been a mill here for centuries, I think. But this place was decommissioned in 1900.
Okay.
And there's one photo we have of it, which people might have seen, and that was taken in 1860. But I think the mill before that is at least 100 or so years before that.
Wow. Okay, so it's from the 17. Wow. That's
17.
Yeah.
And they think before that there might have been some sort of wooden structure here before they built the brick.
Yeah.
And wooden structure.
Yeah.
And then it was decommissioned, like I say, in 1900. And when we bought the house, there was just the brick buttresses and the walls. During the war, the villagers needed bricks, and they just came up and just took bricks from here.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So we lost quite a few bricks, but the main sort of pillars, which would have held up the wooden structure, are still here. So they're probably nearly, they're a couple of 100 years old, these bricks that I'm looking at.
Incredible.
And then, a friend of the family said, we have some barns that are attached to the house. And that's originally what I was thinking about turning into a studio. And then a friend of the family who sort of specializes in green builds said, well, what about the mill? And I was like, what do you mean? It's just a kind of these 4 buttresses and a bit of a footing left. He said we could rebuild it, looking a little bit like it was in the old days at the bottom. Obviously, we can't do the whole thing. You need planning permission and a few £100,000 to go all the way. But we built the bottom out of straw bales, green, a kind of green approach and lime render, and that was a sort of happy accident because the sound of those soft walls has really helped the sound in this room. So,
was that intentional? That wasn't intentional? Was that sort of...
Well, we realized that straw bales would stop the sound going out. And that was one of the things that I was was important to me at that time was I don't want to be playing the drums here and people there's a farm not too far away, but you know, with the wind, there's a possibility that they might hear me. So I said, we've got to try and make it as quiet as we can.
Okay.
But the spin-off of that was there's soft walls, and then internally it sounds really great. And that's just pure luck. And the fact that there's no parallel walls, there's no reflection because it's round. So that also helps. So you don't get any horrible bouncy reflections when I'm recording. It's a very nice kind of solid sound in here. It's amazing.
That is amazing. How cool.
Yeah.
Very unique as well.
So lucky.
So let's talk a little bit about your history with Gretsch. How long have you been with Gretsch? Can you maybe talk about how that started, how your relationship with Gretsch?
I think you're right when you said earlier about 5. I think this might be 6 years I'm going into now. But I have owned a Gretsch kit over half my life. I bought a 1963 round badge when I was 23.
Wow.
And I've used it on many recordings. It's in a studio in Surrey, in Ripley in Surrey, a studio that I always used to record at. So I've done Cher records with that. I've done Ronan Keating albums with that, James Morrison albums with that kit. Enrique I've played on that kit, and it's a lovely little silver sparkle round badge, and it's in my friend Mark's. He's kind of somehow he seems to almost own it now. It's been there for so long. But,
what are the sizes?
It's a 20-inch bass drum by possibly 16. I'm not sure. And a 12 and a 16.
Okay.
And it's just a simple, lovely little round badge, but it just sounds so great in that particular room. I've not had it up here. I'd like to get it up here at some point and try it out for sure. But I've recorded with that kit recently with James Morrison's last record. You're Stronger Than You Know, it's called, and that Gretsch is all over that 60. And I did take my modern kit down, and we used it on about 3 or 4 tunes, but mainly it's my round badge.
Wow, cool.
With modern broadcaster snare drums, etc.
Very cool.
Yeah,
very nice.
So I've always been there, in a way. Like a lot of drummers are, I've heard stories about Porcaro always used to use Gretsch kits in the studio back in the day, and they record so well, and the broadcasters, I love them. It's so focused, the sound.
Yeah, you're really the broadcaster guy. You talk to a lot of Gretsch artists, they play, I got a broadcaster kit, I've got a new classic, I've got USA Custom, but you're very specific about the broadcaster.
I've got 3, and that's it. I haven't got a Brooklyn or a USA or anything like that. Maybe I should. But, I just love them,
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So why do you think, when you talk about the UK, why do you think many of the prominent UK drummers aren't really that known internationally? I mean, of course, we've talked about guys like Charlie Watts and Keith Moon and Ringo Starr, and those guys kind of became famous drummers through their band. But when people talk about top session drummers, like individual drummers, it's usually mostly American names that come up. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I mean, we've got some great session drummers in this country. There's lots. And it's, that's one of the things I'm most proud of, for Zildjian Live, for instance, getting on Zildjian Live, and also the Drummer magazine. I won the recording studio drummer in 2017.
That's right. Yeah.
And I'm only the second British drummer to win that.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts. The first one, the only other guy is Simon Phillips in 1987.
With Pete Townsend, wasn't he with Pete Townsend? Yeah.
Yeah, nuts, and it's like I feel, it's amazing to have managed to sort of break through, like you said, the American wall, as it were. But I don't know what it is. I think what's helped me, obviously, there's no question, is social media. That's definitely helped. And maybe it's just as simple as that. Maybe I'm the only UK session guy that's actually managed to sort of crack the social media to a point where people now know me in the States. Maybe it is just as simple as that. But I think it's also some of the records that I've played on, people, they can, because I think if you just have the social media aspect, that's great. But I think you need to back it up with something. And I think I've played on some albums that people are familiar with in America, for instance, and around the world. And that's probably helped me, get to that position where people are like, oh, okay, this dude, I've heard of him, Right.
You become known. Yeah, that's very interesting. And you mentioned the Modern Drummer Readers Poll, and we're gonna get to that a little bit later, because there's some exciting news about that, of course. And but at first, I just want to ask you a little bit about your process. You seem to only use sounds that originate from a source sound created in your studio. So you hardly ever use triggers. I think I've seen you use a clap trigger, maybe, but that's it. You don't use triggers or samples.
The other day I've got a pad that I've just put up to play a clap, but I never trigger.
Okay. Why not?
Well, I really like recording, and I like the process of, you've got the original sound, and like, how can you manipulate this sound to make it fatter or wider or drier. I love that whole experimentation. And because it's much easier, just, what people do in the studio is, basically they sound replace. So you would record a part, and then a lot of guys will go, the snare drums sounds great, but we're going to use this sample. And it's been going on for years, and they will replace your backbeat with a sample. And that's the quickest, simplest way to get a really cool pop sound, for instance. But I quite like the long way around. I quite like processing the drums to sound like those samples that people dial in. And I love it. I love experimenting with sounds and delays and all those things. And at the heart of it, there is still the original sound. And to be fair, a lot of the sessions that I do, I can't use those sounds because people will go, no, it's got to sound like a drum kit. So a lot of the sessions I do in here, I've got other sounds that are much more natural sounding. And then it's up to the producer, engineers to do what they wish with those drums. But what most people see when I'm experimenting on Instagram, etc., is just me messing around, and I love that process. I really love it. It's manipulating the sound to be a certain way is really cool. I like it.
So where do you draw the line as far as, because you see a lot of people asking, how'd you get that sound? How'd you get that sound? And sometimes you give a little bit of information. And then I think once I saw you answered, it took me 5 years of noodling.
Well, I mean, people can see what I'm doing within reason. And it's interesting, I'm starting to see people out in social media now, and I see, okay, they're using those mics, and I see Cole's microphones everywhere now. And I'm not saying it's just me. I think I've definitely helped in the sort of, making people aware that certain microphones sound a certain way, and that's kind of cool. That's getting back to that influence thing that you're talking about.
I hope you got a good side deal for that.
Well, there's certainly some companies that are aware of what I'm doing, and I'm establishing great relationships with Universal Audio, for instance, which is fantastic plugins and hardware. It's a great process, but I'm just going to keep going. I also feel quite proud of the fact that I'm going to be 52 this year, and I'm still up for trying to change the way that my destination. I like it. I like sort of trying to learn still. Absolutely.
Wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about that 52, because most ordinary people around our age get to the point where they were sitting in an office, or I guess these days sitting in a home office all day, and they daydream about being an in-demand and self-employed session drummer.
Sure.
I know I would be a prime example of that. So I guess my question is, what does Ash Sohn daydream about at 52? Where can it go from here, Ash?
Well, I mean, I still want to. I've got some music. Hopefully, gonna be. I've been working on some music, and I'm still working on some music. I'm trying to push that side of myself. You know, trying to get some. Rather than just a minute-long Instagram, I really love that too. That sort of production side of things and making music. So I want to delve into that a lot more. And still, amazingly, I'm getting to play on some records. You know, I'm very fortunate to play a very small part on the 𝗟𝗣𝗑𝗧𝗦𝗢𝗄 album that just won a Grammy. And I just feel that hopefully, if I can just keep working at it and keep showing that I'm looking forward, that those producers and those artists will still come to me. You know, and I guess at the moment, with what's going on in the world, I'm one of the most visual, I suppose, session drummers that, you know, if you were looking into a shop window, you'd see me. You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely.
So I'm certainly getting quite a lot of work, like I say, from all around the world, because I'm a visual. My job is visual as well. You know, people are seeing it and hearing what I'm doing. So many people will go, "Can you use that snare?" And they'll reference
one of your videos.
Yeah, it's amazing. Right. Or a feel, or a particular sound. It's really interesting that. I never knew that. That's evolved. I never went out of my way to go, I'll tell you what I'll do loads of different sounds, put them up on the internet, and then people can choose what they want on their album. You know, I never thought of it like that, but that certainly seems to be happening. You know? Yeah. Interesting. So hopefully I'll keep going, Lucas, you know, until I can't do it anymore, you know.
Yeah. Wonderful. So when you are you open to recording for someone you don't know? Like, let's say someone writes you on Instagram chat, "Hey, Ash, can you lay down some drums for me and my friends? We gotta."
Yeah. So I've played on. You mean like people that are unsigned, for instance?
Yeah, just someone you've never, no connection, anything, no record company calling you.
Yeah, every day people reach out. I'm an independent artist. Would you consider playing on it? And musically, if I'm into it, yeah, absolutely, I will.
Okay, so that's the prerequisite.
Oh, the music has to be right. I mean, I'm not just gonna, I'm not a mercenary. I'm not just gonna rinse people for their money. You know, it's like the music has to be right, and it has to be a challenge, or I have to feel that what I do will fit. And I'll definitely do it. You know, there's no question. There's some fantastic people making music out there that aren't on the Grammy Awards. You know,
of course, yeah, of course, that's wonderful. Yeah. And so, what would be your turnaround time if someone asked you to record something for them?
Well, if I've not got much on it, I could get it back to them within a couple of days if they want to.
Oh, really? That fast?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I mean, if I've got a few things on my plate at the moment, so it won't be that now. But right. But often, they can send me something, and I guess what you're getting at, if I've got other sessions, I need to prioritize those. But right. I always give it a try.
That's amazing, and I bet you're going to get a couple requests after this.
I'll probably get inundated with things, but I mean, I don't think I'm the only one. I'm pretty sure that Aaron Sterling will play for people. Same deal. I'm pretty sure. I've not talked to him about it, but I'm pretty sure that he'll play on projects if it feels right.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So can you talk about like a typical day at the office for Ash Sohn? Like what's a typical day for you? Are you someone who gets up early and starts work?
I get up early because my kids get up early.
Right. So, okay.
So I did the school run this morning, and I was in the studio, I think, just after 9, about 10 past 9, I was in here.
Okay.
And then I had some sessions that I needed to finish off. I had 2 songs to finish, and I did that mainly today. And then I worked on a track which there's an artist that I really love, and I'm messing around with one of their tunes without their permission, actually.
All right.
But I just love this particular tune so much, and there's no drums on it originally, and I'm thinking I just want to. So in the afternoon I spent some time doing that, but I'm in here absolutely every day doing something, tweaking a sound, sending files to somebody, doing something. I'm absolutely every single day I'm in here, and I just feel very, very fortunate that I've got it.
I guess as a family man, it provides a great deal of flexibility, so you can take care of your kids and your family. And
that's right. And if it's great, I can call the shots too. Some people, there's a British artist I'm working for at the moment. He's started a new record. A guy called Gary Barlow, who is the main singer in a band called Take That, which is a British band. And I did some work on his last album. He got a #1 with that, and then he's immediately started another record, and I've done 3 songs on that. But that engineer knows that I've got family, and Gary knows I've got family. So if I'm like, you know what, it's bath time, I've got to get back to the house, we'll pause the session and catch up later. It's really flexible, and everybody's, especially now with what's going on, everyone's in the same boat.
Yeah, people are supportive. That's really nice.
Yeah.
So I saw you were thinking about, or you were saying in one of your recent posts that you were interested in giving recording lessons at your windmill studio. How do you imagine that working?
Recording lessons, yeah. Well, it's something that I've been bugged by people. I do 21 drums with Mark Juliana and Sput and Mike Johnson, and it's like I've been bugged by people to do it myself, and I thought, well, I can't just copy what everybody else has been doing on their drum camps. We've got to offer something different. And I guess the obvious difference is that recording is something I don't think is happening. So I just sort of threw it out there the other day on Instagram, and we got 3,000 people responded. Yeah. 2,500 of them want to camp in my field, which is in the summer. So I'll be honest with you, this is the first time I've said it. I'm thinking about doing it in September. We're working on getting the land prepared and getting all of the obvious things sorted out, showers and toilets and catering, all the stuff. And we've started the journey, and hopefully, if all goes well with the virus, September is probably when we're going to offer it. And it'll be small classes in here, just at weekends. I'm just going to do weekends for now.
Okay. Can I give a piece of advice on this one? I think you I want to give you a piece of advice. I think you should ask your wife before you do this.
Oh, no, she's very much in on it.
Before 3,000 people are camping on your front yard.
It was my wife's idea to just test the water like that. She said, "Why don't you just put one of those question things up on Instagram?" I said, "Yeah, good idea. Let's just see." And it was just, I'd made my mind up actually before I did that we were just going to hire the local hotel and put everybody up in there, and then ferry them to our house. Yeah. But immediately doing that, it's like, okay, well, that's out the window. I mean, there's such a small percentage of people that really want to actually not be here and part of the experience. And my experience with some of the camps that I've done, it is often the hang. Yeah. After the lessons and the coffee and maybe a beer at night around a campfire, that's really what people. That's when you start getting the real nitty gritty from a musician. That's a musician's experience. That's when the stories start happening. That's when people, feel relaxed enough that they can answer questions and ask questions. So I think it's going to be very much sort of proper hang, and I'm going to cover the things that I get bombarded with. The questions like, how do you make that snare drum sound like that? when they're in the room with me, they will be able to see where the microphone's positioned, what I'm doing with my compressor, what I'm doing with the plugins. And
so you have a projector outside, like a big screen, maybe?
Well, no, I'm thinking about 8 people in here, which is probably about maxed out. And I'll have a mirrored screen of my Pro Tools, a larger one that the guys can see working on it, and they will see the process. Okay,
but that's 8 people, and you've got 3,000 people that might show.
I know. I could be doing it every summer for the rest of my life.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. It'd be like a festival, you know. It'd be like.
I'm sure there's going to be a lot of, like I say, we're in the embryonic stages, but I've got a rough idea of what I'm going to offer, and it's just amazing that people want to, just seem to want to really get involved. And actually, some guys want to bring their vans and park their camper vans. It's like, and I guess, it also that in Norfolk, we're right in the countryside here. And I guess it is a really great way, as long as the weather's okay, it would be a really brilliant way of experiencing the studio and the environment that we've got here. It's a proper camp. And if the weather's good, a beer and looking up at the stars and around a bonfire, and then the next day we get into figuring out, okay, what does compression do? I mean, it could be a great experience.
I know people would love to attend that. So keep us posted on your social media about that.
Yeah, I'm gonna just we're like I say, we're at the very early stages, but now we know people want to do it. We're gonna try and make it the best experience we can.
Well, we've got Jules saying that she's going to come, and
absolutely. There's lots of guys who want to come, and ladies. It's like awesome response. People have really kind of engaged with this room.
Incredible.
Some people, they just want to come and have a look at this place. It's like a weird kind of sort of sanctuary for people.
Wow. Very interesting. I also see a lot of people asking about, and I've actually had this thought of myself, like, Bob, it'd be cool to have like an album of Ash's grooves, because your grooves are so like spacey and groovy and just such a nice, it's just a special sound, very unique. And I often wonder, like, man, it'd be cool if you had an album, I could buy it. And do you think about maybe making an album with your grooves on it and in your studio? Or do you have any plans for like an album release?
Yeah, well, I'm doing. Can we talk about that stuff that we talked about now? Is that a good time to?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So the Seth Meyers show.
Yeah,
I'm on that next week.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. There you go.
There you go.
So how does that work for those of you who don't watch Seth Meyers regularly? How is that show working now?
So they have like a lot of businesses that the band's remote. They asked me about 3 years ago to go to New York to do it, and there was some complications with visas and etc. And it never worked out. And then Eric, who books all the drummers, I mean, there's some fantastic drummers sit in. He said, your place is perfect. He asked me last year, and I had a few personal problems with family, and I couldn't manage to do it. So he's come back to me this year, and it's great. And I've recorded it. It's an interesting experience. I set the camera up, make sure that you have to have an outfit ready for the particular day that you're on, and they choose whichever outfit you're going to wear. And it's like just like a proper TV show. I've done a few TV shows in my time, and it's all recorded remotely.
Wow.
And mine will be next week, like every day next week. But one of the things that they said, have I got a product? Have you got a book? Have you got an album? And I thought, maybe this is the time. I've been working on some stuff, and I thought maybe this is the time I should just release a little bit of music that I've been working on.
Okay.
And I've just got a little EP coming out, and I'm going to drop that next week as well.
Wow, next week, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. So where can we get this?
So it will be available on all the digital, Spotify, iTunes. It'll be available on all the digital platforms.
Where can we get this so you get paid?
I guess eventually I'll get some money from Spotify, but it'll take a while. The best one would be iTunes or Google Music, or
so no vinyl being.
Not at the moment, I've not thought about vinyl. I will eventually have it on a site, so you'll be able to buy it directly from me. But by that point, hopefully I'll have some more music out anyway. This is just a little tester just to see if people are even interested in what I'm doing. And there's some cool stuff on there. There's a couple of really great guitar players out in the world that have helped me, and there's some great guys on it. I did a track, a crazy tune last year on Instagram with Stuart Copeland, and I reached out to Stuart and said, "Would you mind if I put it on the EP?" And he's like, "Sure." So we've that's gonna make it out so people can relive it. It's such a crazy. Basically, I play the drums and Stuart plays bass and guitar and keyboards, so he's added some really bonkers stuff to it, like only he can.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's going to be on the EP. So yeah, I'm just interested to see what the response. Same deal, really, with the lessons and the whole windmill weekend thing. I'm just seeing what sticking out the flagpole, as they say, and see who salutes. And
great. Wow.
So I'm going to see with the music, but I think hopefully people will dig it. And I've already got ideas now. It's great, the Seth Meyers thing, because it's kicked my rear end into actually getting some music out. I'm really looking forward to working on some more. I've got more already. I'm working on stuff already now.
Okay, your second album's already in the works.
Well, I should do a proper album, and it should be some actual real, real interaction with other musicians as well. But it's I'm really, I've got the bug now, So answer to your question that you asked ages ago, that's what I hope to do, is just keep churning out music and being creative for as long as I can.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful, and all on the Gretsch drums.
All on Gretsch drums, yeah.
And so let's we're gonna slowly wrap things up here, but you've been nominated recently by Modern Drummer for a session drummer.
Yep.
The Modern Drummer Readers Poll. And,
unbelievable.
What do you think of that? How do you feel about that?
It's like we touched on before. In 2017, it blew my mind. To be on that. Who
were you up against back then?
That was Stephen Wolf, Aaron Sterling. 𝗚𝗏𝗧𝗦𝗔𝗚 was on in 2017, and the guy that plays with Toto now,
Jeff Beccaro.
No, sadly not.
Someone watching knows. Shannon Ford.
That's it. Yeah. So there's some heavy competition in this year's, but I'm just honored that. I think the way that it works is that there's a panel, independent panel, and they go down a list of all the categories, and obviously enough people mention myself to get on that particular poll, and I'm honored to make it on there, and I guess if I win it, that's UK history right there. That I will be the only UK drummer to won it twice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, so where can people vote for this? They just go to Modern Drummer?
Yeah, they just go to the Modern Drummer site, and I think it's on the first page there. And I think you go down and you go through all the categories. Eventually, you'll see studio, and I would love it if you could. put the where I am, and then I think you go to the bottom and you add your email, and then just click submit, and you're rocking.
Cool.
But it would be an honor, to win it again, I have to say, and also just incredible to be able to fly the flag for the Brits, British session drum.
Yeah, absolutely.
To be honest with you, that's the thing I'm most proud of, is that I've managed to not only win it once, but get through and be on it again. being a British drummer when there's so many thank you, Jules.
There you go, Jules.
Yeah. That when there's so many incredible American drummers that we all look up to, and I still do. All of those guys on that list, you know, I feel honored to be alongside them, you know.
Yeah. Who else was on there? Matt Chamberlain was on there?
And Matt Chamberlain, 𝗟𝗓𝗓𝗓. Yeah.
Wow. J.R. Robinson. Wow.
Yeah.
Those are some big cats.
There's some heavyweights there.
Heavyweights.
Yeah.
Very nice, Ash. Well, you know, such a pleasure having you here on this show.
Well,
and
thanks for having me.
So interesting to hear about all the projects you've got going on and the ideas. And we're just so lucky to have you playing Gretsch drums. We're so grateful for you for being such a wonderful ambassador for the brand and in your videos, but also as a person. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you better, and you know, it's so nice to for me, it's nice to be a fan of somebody and then to actually meet them and actually really like them as a person. And that's definitely the case with you.
Yeah,
you're just a great guy, so humble, so cool. It's so fun talking to you.
Thank you, mate. Well, it's been a long journey, you know, and I guess, you know, after a while, I feel very lucky that I'm still doing it, even, you know, and hopefully that comes across, that I'm still incredibly passionate about music and playing the drums, and I think it comes across my passion for it, and I do generally wake up in the morning and go, wow, this is amazing. I'm still doing it, you know.
Yeah,
I'm still doing this thing that I loved when I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, you've worked so hard, and you certainly deserve all the success that you're getting, and it's great to watch. And thank you so much for coming on the show and spending this time with us. And we will invite you back, and we will celebrate hopefully soon after you win the readers poll.
You never know. You never know. But it's just
we're crossing our fingers for you.
Great to be on the list. You know, just that's a winner for me.
Congratulations, Ash, and thanks again for coming on the show. It's great having you here. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye. Ash Sohn, ladies and gentlemen, how about that? That was a lot of fun. So let's move on to this week's. Here we go. Oh, actually, it's actually time for us to join the Gretsch Drums factory in Ridgeland, South Carolina, and I think we've got a video queued up here from the crew in Ridgeland. Let's take a look.
Hey, everybody. This is Josh, the production manager at the Gretsch factory in Ridgeland, South Carolina. Today I'm going to show you a little bit more of one of the processes we do. I'm in the wood shop where we do all our shell prep and sanding, and I'm with Hilly Magwood, who's our wood shop lead, and today is Hilly's 9th anniversary working here. And he's going to show you how to sand with 100 grit sandpaper on the outside of the shell, and then he will show you how to redo our final sand with 180 on what we call our spinning machine. All right. nice and smooth.
Nice and smooth, no doubt. That was awesome. And you really see in that video how these drums are completely handcrafted. There is no lasers or machine or high-tech machinery going on in Ridgeland, that's for sure. These are real artisans handcrafting these amazing instruments. Pretty cool video. Thanks for sharing that, guys. It's now time to move on to this week's quiz question, which should be easy if you were listening carefully in the first segment, which I know all of you were. The first segment was on Gretsch in the early 1950s, and we'll be awarding the prize to the first 3 people who respond correctly in either the Facebook or YouTube comment sections. And the question is, what is the name of the Gretsch artist who had a 4-inch signature snare named after him in the early 1950s? So please send your answer into the chat sections, and the first 3 people who write the answers in will get the t-shirt. So I think we are going to slowly start winding things down here. Be sure to check our other flagship live stream called Generations, which brings 2 amazing drummers, one veteran who's been playing Gretsch for 4 years and one relatively newbie to the family. The next episode is Wednesday, March 24th at 11 a.m. California time and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and will feature Jean-Paul Gaster from the band Clutch and Caleb Crosby, who is the drummer for Tyler Bryant and the Shakedown. So very cool. Be sure to check out that, and also be sure to check out Gretsch artist 𝗚𝗏𝗡𝗧𝗦𝗔 show called Gretsch Afternoon Drum Break, which is available on Facebook and YouTube at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Friday. And I've jokingly asked Neil to make sure he tries to interview every single Gretsch artist on the Gretsch Drums roster, and he has taken me to task in actually doing that. So check it out. He is well on his way. I think he's up in his 40s now as far as number of episodes, mid-40s. So Neil's a great interviewer. He did a wonderful interview with Turkish Gretsch artist 𝗟𝗏𝗘𝗏𝗏 last time, and he will be interviewing Van Romein this Friday, which should be really interesting. So just search Gretsch Afternoon Drum Break in your Facebook or YouTube, and you will find 𝗚𝗏𝗏𝗘𝗏𝗏 and his wonderful Gretsch show. Also, this coming weekend, the Gretsch family will be auctioning off some incredible items from the Gretsch family collection at Julian's auction. This is the catalog. You can see it is full of some beautiful Gretsch guitars and drums. A lot of stuff will be auctioned off. So for those of you who are interested in Gretsch instruments, this is a nice chance to get some good pricing on Gretsch products. Check that out. That should be very cool. A lot of overstock things, all sorts of different items. Just check out Julian's auction. You can go and juliansauctions.com, and the auction will be this coming Friday and Saturday. So take note of that. Should be fun. And finally, of course, please join us for next month for episode 8 of Gretsch Heritage, where we will take a closer look at Gretsch in the mid-50s. And that'll be on Wednesday, April 14th. At 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 a.m. Pacific Time. And that's about all that I've got for you folks today. What a fun show it's been. Please sure to shoot me a DM over Instagram at Lucas Van Gretsch so we can connect, engage, and discuss. And of course, special thanks to Scott Donnell and Andrew Shreve and Jules Thomas and all the folks at DW for being such great partners for the Gretsch family. Thanks, of course, to my Aunt Dinah, Uncle Fred, and the crew at the Pooler office, and also the amazing Gretsch Drums production crew in Ridgeland, South Carolina. Also, a special thanks to my wife, Papachi, and my daughters, Sylvia and Ramona. And lastly, special thanks to Opa, Richie, and Maggie, my Aunt Katie, Happy and Ernie Copley, and all my beautiful Gretsch cousins. This one, too, is for Gigi. In the words of my Uncle Fred Gretsch, be safe, be well, be musical, my friends. Good night, everyone.